Word on the bird is that Hezbollah has officially joined the war against Israel. This is not surprising, but it's always it's a matter of how much escalation is there going to be in these sorts of conflicts when we have them every few years. Is it going to be just Hamas? Is it going to be Hamas and Hezbollah? Is it going to be Hamas, Hezbollah with some outside help? Israel, for its part, has apparently actually declared war, which it hasn't done since the 70s. It's funny, formal declarations of war seem so quaint these days. The U.S., after all, hasn't declared war on any country since Nazi Germany. Yet, the U.S. has waged many a war against many countries, whether it be Iraq, Russia, Korea, North Korea specifically. The list goes on. And so for now, Israel is fighting a two-front war. We don't know if it will open up into more than that. I would doubt it. I wouldn't expect like the Jordanians to invade the West Bank like what happened in, was that 67, I think. Now, I don't speak Arabic, and so it's been hard to find anything from the Arab side. I don't really know what their goals are, but I am hearing, I've seen at least a couple of people say, and again, this is the best I can do. There's no official sourcing. There's not even a claimed unofficial translation, nothing. But there are people saying that the goal of this war is to try and geographically unite Gaza and the West Bank so that it is no longer split into two pieces, which would certainly, I'm sure, make their efforts to organize with one another easier. West Bank, after all, is landlocked and is pitter-pattered with Israeli Bantustans, these little enclaves, essentially suburbs that are entirely populated with Israelis. And then the surrounding areas are all full of non-Israelis, people who don't have citizenship, I should say. Because if you say, well, the Arabs aren't given citizenship by Israel, they'll point to the 20% that of Israeli citizens, who are Arabs that are essentially tokens, and say, well, no, look, there are Israeli Arabs. Look, they're right here. It says so on their ID. We mark them on their driver's license. It has to denote that they're an Arab, so that when they get pulled over, the police know to harass them. But then the rest of the Arabs, they're non-citizens. And so I don't know if this is the case, but it would make sense. At least there'd be some goal. Because this does seem like to be it does seem like it's a planned defensive. It doesn't just seem like they're taking pot shots. It seems like they're actually trying to, maneuver troops, capture territory, do something. And so if that's the case, you could probably look at what Hezbollah is doing as a diversion, trying to draw Israeli resources up to the north, even though the main offensive would be taking place in the south. Although if that were the case, if they were coordinating from the beginning, you would think that they wouldn't have waited a whole day, because Israel's a small country. It's given Israel an entire day to move their resources down to the south to focus on Hamas. And so if anything, it would be more like Hamas is acting as a diversion for Hezbollah. Wars can be boring if the goal of the war is just war itself. Which a lot of the times with these Israeli conflicts, that's kind of what it seems like. It just seems like, one side wanted to F up the other. And so they started firing at the other one, and then the others fire back, and they level a few buildings, and then everyone, brushes off their knees and goes back home for the day. That's pretty boring. That's just death and destruction. There's no change, there's no character development, there's no plot. It's just mindless violence. Could you imagine watching a war film, which was just people blowing each other up? Actually, I heard there was a movie like that recently. I think it was called Sisu, and people quite liked it. Now, speaking of linking Gaza and the West Bank, something that I think was proposed by Jared Kushner back when he was, remember him? Back when he was around and trying to solve solve the Arab problem for the Israelis was I think his plan called for having a highway that went between Gaza and the West Bank, so that they were not completely separated entities, and they could trade with each other, and function and have something of a functioning economy. And so this road, it would probably be like some kind of big overpass, looking like a Roman aqueduct, going over all the parts of Israel in between them, so that the Palestinians could travel between these two places without having to go through a bunch of checkpoints. And so it looks like maybe Hamas has gotten the same idea. But I don't want to dawdle on that for too long, because, like I said, that's a rumor at this point. I mean, it's almost less than a rumor. I wish we could see a little more, so that I could understand, because just for trying to analyze it, it's not about like, oh, I need the Hamas perspective, so that I can repeat their propaganda. It's like, well, no, but I still need to know like what their goals are, what they're thinking. I mean, we get the Israeli side, we know what the Israeli side thinks, but it's like, why are they doing this? I heard that it was something to do with a response to like retribution for something. I can't even remember at this point. But it's like, okay, you could say, well, it's revenge, but it's like, well, what is your revenge going to look like? Is it really just killing people? Is that the entire goal? If so, it is pretty darn stupid. Because in a battle of just pure killing power, you know that the Israelis outmatch you. And that if you kill 10 of theirs, they can come back and kill 100 of you, without breaking a sweat. We've seen the videos, I think it was from the last Gaza war. Israel can just controlled demolition, a skyscraper, or I shouldn't say skyscraper, a mid-rise tower, because they don't have skyscrapers in Gaza, but they do have some mid-rise apartment buildings, and they can absolutely Building 7 those with a missile. I mean, I've seen it. One Israeli missile just hits this building, and the whole thing collapses straight down into its own footprint. And so I can only imagine that this this adventure, excuse me, will end the same way for them. But when you're desperate, maybe you just come to terms and say, you know what, this is the best we can do. The best we can do is make life difficult for them. I mean, this is kind of the strategy behind terrorism, is that, you go, okay, well, sure, I can't beat them with sheer force. But if we just keep carrying out these pricks every once in a while, it will keep them on edge, and it will prevent the enemy from feeling safe, and they'll never be happy, and it gives you outsized leverage, relative to your actual raw strength. Or it could just be a suicide mission, and I mean, like, for the whole thing. Obviously, for the guys who go out and are actual suicide bombers, that is a suicide mission. But I mean, for the organization, for this faction, do they just not care if they win or not? Do they accept, hey, we're going to lose, but we want to go out in a blaze of glory? I mean, it's hard to put yourself in their shoes, because there's certainly a lot of emotional baggage, and a lot of them probably are just ready to die, rather than live in acceptance of their lot in life. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.